It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical Mains and Duts. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague, one of the few men who wasn't called trash by Jalen Ramsey. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
It's almost as if, by being ignored by Jalen, it just means I'm not trying hard enough. I think I'd rather have been called, garbage, average, trash, okay, overrated, but just be completely ignored. I think that's even more insulting.
I like he's got an opinion. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. Like it definitely isn't the NFL's cup of tea. I know they love a player who doesn't say anything, but I'm fine with it. Like.
I mean, I just think I'm not sure there's much of a future in the NFL for cornerbacks who like to talk a lot. I just think it's I don't think we've ever seen this before.
No, it's weird that the secondary players like big mouths.
The only response I would have to that is just say, hey, what's your position group called again? Secondary? Yeah, thought so.
Oh, nice. Done double duty this week, catching up after a week off. So we're actually doing the show we should be doing, and that is the NFC South. Big division, big personalities, big teams, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, bless them.
As always, normal fare. We'll tell you the ins and outs of the team. We'll give you a big question. Neil will give us his expertise and give us a fancy breakout and a fantasy broke. Then we'll look at the win totals, home and road splits, and we'll decide whether that team is a champ or a chump.
And you may even name actual players who play for that team.
I find that highly unlikely, as I'm not gonna lie. The ins and outs in this NFC South was not easy. There isn't a lot of players who changed teams in the NFC South.
Really isn't. I mean, you just obviously we'll get to this, but if you look at the available target percentage for the four teams, there's only the Panthers who are. The Panthers have got 35% of their targets from last season available. The rest, it's the Falcons 15.5, New Orleans 17.2, Tampa Bay less than 12%. So on offense, this division pretty much is like, no, we're quite happy where we are.
Yeah, which is fine, but it does shorten one section of this show. But that nobody cares about us, Neil. So let's get it started, and let's start with the Atlanta Falcons. As I said, some dude called Brandon Fuzco. I only brought him in because it's a cool name. Their draft pick was Calvin Ridley, wide receiver, Alabama. They'd done that before, it worked, so why not go back to that? Well, outs, Taylor Gabriel, Dontari Poe, and Adrian Claiborne. The
big whoop.
Yeah, this is the problem, right? The big question for the Atlanta Falcons is time ticking on their Super Bowl window?
I don't think it is. I think this is one of, whisper it, I think this is one of the most underrated rosters in the NFL. I think on offense, they've tied Matt Ryan down. Matt Ryan regressed in 2017, but he was coming off an MVP season. Julio Jones has had 1,400 receiving yards in 4 consecutive years. Devonta Freeman, leads a pretty good ground game. They've got some lovely pieces on defense. I think this team is, quietly set up to have a good few years yet.
I think it's one of them things. I think when you're 28-3 up in the Super Bowl and you don't win, and then the next year it doesn't go very well because you've gone from Kyle Shanahan to a hobo as offensive coordinator, people begin to be concerned. There hasn't been much change. A little bit of noise about Julio Jones being unhappy, which they kind of fixed by giving him a check, basically.
The most pointless holdout in NFL history.
Yeah, but people, they had his money and he wanted it. They're still a talented team, but it's with all these teams. Matt Ryan's excellent, they get to the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan's not excellent, they don't. Do you know what I mean? And it kind of is that simple, and it's that simple for a lot of teams, especially 3 of the teams in this division, right? literally heavily reliant on their quarterback being as good as they can be. That doesn't mean they need to be the best quarterback in the NFL, possibly with the exception of one of them, but that they need to be at their peak level for that team to meet its targets. If Ryan and the offensive coordinator don't mesh again, there's a serious problem, especially as, like, Matt Ryan's not getting any younger.
I think that, for everything that we say, and we do criticise Steve Sarkisian, often with justification, the Falcons were still second in the NFL last year in yards per drive and seventh in points per drive. And don't get me wrong, don't forget, they were Julio Jones not losing his footing away from beating the Eagles in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it becomes almost a narrative conversation, doesn't it? As you said, Julio doesn't lose his footing; they win that game, and they might go back to the Super Bowl. But he did, and therefore and he didn't, and now there's questions on the team. So,
although the one thing that you can say moving forward in the Falcons' favour is that they went 6-5 last season in one-score games. You can get a little bit more ruthless on offense. That 6-5 becomes,
8-3.
8-3, and then straight away, you've got a leg up in the division and in the conference.
Absolutely, Neil. Absolutely. Right, let's go fantasy style on the Falcons. Who's their fantasy breakout?
The fantasy breakout, obviously we know that Devonta Freeman is the lead back, but in the last couple of years, Tevin Coleman has shown he can have weekly standalone value as the other guy. Now, Tevin Coleman's in his contract year, and the Falcons drafted Ito Smith, who I believe is the all-time yards from scrimmage leader for Southern Miss. They've got no incentive to use Ito Smith, obviously, while they've still got Tevin Coleman, but if they look towards the future, and if Coleman gets nicked up, which is likely because he hasn't been injury-free in his time in the NFL. Freeman as well, his carry percentage has gone down in each of the last 3 seasons. I think it's gone 65%, 58%, 49%. So it's not a picture of health. They might want to start working in Ito Smith. He's going undrafted at the moment. It's just a name to consider if movement occurs in terms of the fitness of the other running backs.
I love the idea of being called Ito as your first name. Who's fantasy broke, Neil?
I wrote earlier this off-season for Rotoviz about early round wide receivers who don't break out as rookies and how it's a very, very difficult road ahead if you don't. That being said, I don't think Calvin Ridley is going to be anything special this year, not at his current ADP. He's currently the wide receiver 49, which it doesn't sound anything worth shouting about. But when you consider some of the wide receivers who are still available after his current ADP, I'll just give you some examples. Kenny Stills is the most efficient late-round wide receiver in the NFL. Tyler Lockett could see a big workload this year. We'll get to the Seahawks next week. My boy Kenny Golladay, John Brown, Martavis Bryant. These are all people who are available after Calvin Ridley, and all of them have a easier path to fantasy relevance than Ridley, because last time I checked, Julio didn't retire and is still a member of the Atlanta Falcons.
And I guess, and that's the issue, right? It's do you want to be the, as you said, number 49 when you're definitely not number 1 on your own team? It becomes an issue. Are you going to be able to rely on them? Win total for the Atlanta Falcons, Neil, is 9.5. They have home games against the Bengals, the Giants, the Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Cardinals. They have road games against the Eagles, which is week 1, which is the Eagles banner game. The Steelers, Washington, the Browns, and the Packers. So a toughish road schedule. Obviously, also have to travel to New Orleans and Carolina. Not easy games. So win total 9.5. Champs or chumps for the Atlanta Falcons?
I'm going to say champs because the Atlanta Falcons are the poster boys for regression has to hit this season. Matt Ryan has to be better. Julio Jones has to score more touchdowns. And from as I say, 6-5 in one-score games, that's going to go either one way or the other. But I think given the pieces and the fact that the Falcons have gone 11-5 and 10-6 in the last 2 seasons, I think it's going to be positive regression. And I'm going to take the over on those wins. In fact, I'm going to go even bold. We still got 3 teams to talk about. These are your division champions right here.
Nice, Neil, nice. I think 10-6 is a safe number for the Atlanta Falcons. As you said, lots of talent, especially on offense. They sort out that one-score game. Sarkisian is better, and in the connection with Ryan's better, although the stats suggest that he wasn't terrible. The eye test said it wasn't as good. If it can be better, then I think they're over probably champs, and they will be challenging to win the division, no doubt.
I spoke to Gina Thomas of the Falcoholic for RV32 this week.
What an absolutely spectacular name.
That is brilliant, isn't it? That's their version of Bleeding Green. That's their SB Nation site.
Nice.
And in doing some research, I debunked the myth that Julio Jones doesn't get looks in the red zone. He's the 8th most targeted wide receiver inside the 20 in the last 3 years. But of the 8 wide receivers who have seen at least 50 targets, none have a lower touchdown rate than Julio Jones.
That's what happens.
So he does get targeted. He's just not very good.
Well, it's tough to score when 7 fellas are around you.
Well, yeah.
Next team, Dutton, the Carolina Panthers. The change. Inns, I don't know if you've listened to the Around the NFL Fantasy Extravaganza, but Chris Westling and Marcus Grant's hero, CJ Anderson, Dontari Poe, and everybody's favourite draft darling, DJ Moore, wide receiver from Maryland.
A good school with an impeccable reputation, no doubt.
If you don't know what Neil is talking about, go on ESPN. You may find out that Neil is not telling the truth.
No.
Out, Kurt Coleman, Jonathan Stewart, who I think played in the first ever Carolina Panthers game, so a big loss. It was him and Kevin Green.
He was a ball boy.
Andrew Norwell and Star Latulele. Yeah, I said that right. Can't remember DeMarco Murray, but can say Star Latulele. Big question, Dutton. Come up with a more perfect match than Cam Newton and Norv Turner. I'll wait.
Me and salad.
Yeah, you and Sal's a good one. Our friends, the Listers and the Mullins and Steak would be a good one. Yeah, Everton fans in Anfield.
And people who listen to podcasts and this.
Yeah, exactly right, exactly. This is not really a match made in heaven, is it, Cam Newton and Norv Turner, Neil?
No, it's jobs for the boys. Ron Rivera and Norv Turner go way back. And ultimately, after years of Dave Schuler, is it Dave or was it Mike Schuler? Mike Schuler. Doing Mike Schuler things, they obviously got bored and just decided they need to make a change, which is a lovely idea, except Norv Turner's never worked with a quarterback like Cam Newton before, and your offensive line's trash. So ultimately, you're not really set up for success here.
Mainly due to the fact that Norv likes his quarterback to hold the ball for ages and then lower it downfield, right?
Norv Turner is one of the most successful disciples of the Air Coryell system, yes, which is not suited to Cam Newton, probably has the arm, doesn't have the accuracy. And, you just get the idea that Norv is going to try and, cut his legs off and say, no, you don't need to be running. No, he does. Especially for someone who drafted him in the 3rd round of the Scott Fish Bowl. He needs to be running, Norv, believe me. Again, I worry about the Panthers from a regression standpoint because they went 8-1 in one-score games in 2017. That ain't happening again. But I just think they've lost some pieces. Defensively, they were very good last year. If you look at the numbers, they certainly from a sack point of view, they had the 2nd highest sack percentage in terms of forced sacks. They were pretty middle of the road elsewhere. So they weren't great. I stand corrected. I'm telling lies. But they've lost some pieces on the defense. Thomas Davis is suspended. Obviously, he's a huge loss. Luke Kuechly is one concussion away, I think, from seriously having to consider whether he should actually be playing. And I don't think they're great on offense. I think they've got some decent pieces, but I think if you look at them, Cam Newton is the best of players at their position. I think Greg Olsen might bounce back. He was obviously injury affected. But then you look at wide receivers, they've got either untested or unproven. the running backs, I don't know. I worry about this team. I don't think they're going to be any great shakes this year, just because I don't think they're set up in the trenches on either side to be what they have been.
Were they ever any good on offense? I guess is a question. I mean, I know Cam was the MVP, but it was like a kind of Cam one-man show. I think they had like Kelvin Benjamin and, I mean, Greg Olsen's good. But they just, like, not good. Like,
if you took Cam Newton out of this team over the last 4 years and put in a bog standard league average quarterback, they would not have been successful in any way, shape, or form.
No, and weird because Cam Newton's one of the most criticised quarterbacks in the NFL.
Wonder why that is.
Well, yeah, but I sometimes wonder, should we focus on what's going on the field, not that necessarily he's a preening schmo. I don't know. Carolina, they've done more than I've expected numerous times under Ron Rivera, and that leads me to believe that he's a pretty good coach. Do I agree that Norv Turner seems like a really bad decision? Yeah, I don't understand why you would do that. It's
terrible.
It's up there with the Seattle hiring Brian Schottenheimer debacle that we'll get onto in a week or so.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah, there's a ransomware. It's like those two teams, but we'll focus on Carolina, have seen what the Rams have done. I've seen what the Eagles have done. I've seen what the Vikings have done. I've seen what Kansas City have done, and completely and utterly ignored it.
Yeah.
Well, if they're gonna zig, we're gonna zag. Yeah, bravo. Why don't you just get Joe Gibbs out of retirement? Do you know what I mean? What's your thought process?
No, we don't need to adapt. We're football guys.
Yeah. College, no one needs to understand what's going on in college to play NFL. Okay.
No.
Cool. Enjoy.
RPOs, get them out of here.
Enjoy being not that good. Who's the fancy breakout?
The fancy breakout from an opportunity point of view, you've already mentioned him, is CJ Anderson. Now, CJ Anderson wasn't great for the Denver Broncos last year, despite 1,000 yards, but he's bound to be an upgrade on, Jonathan Stewart, who was. I'm trying to put this in terms of, the vintage, in terms of the veteran stage of his career last year. He wasn't a veteran; he was dead. That's he was terrible. He's left behind 202 carries essentially, that. I'm sure they would like to give Christian McCaffrey a big chunk of them, but as Christian McCaffrey is a souped-up version of Danny Woodhead, I don't see it happening. So I think CJ Anderson is going to take an awful lot of Jonathan Stewart's work. If the Panthers are any good, that could be a decent workload, but if Panthers go into negative game script, then it is going to be good news for Christian McCaffrey and bad for Anderson, because I don't see him catching an awful lot of passes. But considering Anderson at the moment is your RB41, I think that's decent value for someone who could, at his worst, if things are going well, could be a touchdown-dependent flex option.
Who's fantasy broke, Neil?
Well, I've already shot down one rookie wide receiver in this division, so why not go for the other one? It's DJ Moore. Now, again, at the moment, he's been drafted wide receiver 44. I already read out some names that are still available when you've already taken Moore. And I just don't think. We talk about the match between Newton and Norv Turner. I don't think at the moment Moore is a good match for Cam Newton. So it's a question of which it's I'm in a battle between me and the wallpaper. One of us has got to go. Is he going to adapt to Newton or is Newton going to adapt to him? Don't know. So I just think we know Greg Olsen is going to get his targets. I think Devin Funchess is going to get his targets. Christian McCaffrey is going to get his. I just think Moore could be a way down the totem pole. He could break out. He could be something special. We have seen it happen to wide receivers in this division. But I just think for what you could get without taking Moore at his current ADP, I'm not interested.
Win total for the Panthers is 8.5. They have home games against the Cowboys, the Bengals, and then the Giants. That's back to back. The Ravens and the Seahawks, all of their home out of division games are done by week 12. They have road games against Washington and the Eagles. That's back to back. Steelers and the Lions, that's back to back, and then they have the Browns. 8.5, Neil. Champs or chumps?
I'm going to say chumps. Just because, again, I think if we go for the regression theory, they're not going to go 8-1 in one-score games. And unless they start blowing teams out, which I don't think they're going to do, they're going to come back to the mean for that. So 8-1 is going to go to what? 5-4, 4-5. So I think I'm going to take the under on the win total, and there'll be no playoffs for the Panthers this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It looks like a 7-9 team, maybe 8-8. But I don't see them making the playoffs. As I said, don't like what they've done. The coaching staff, and they have a franchise quarterback who has a specific set of skills. So I don't understand why you don't try and make the most out of those skills by putting coaches and players around them to assist in that activity.
Because they're football guys, mate.
Exactly. Next team, Dutton, the New Orleans Saints. The change. Inns, they drafted Marcus Davenport from the University of Texas, San Antonio. What a great name. I read that and I was like, do they mean Texas? And I was like, no, they do mean University of Texas, San Antonio. Outs. One of the best jobs ever, Chase Daniel and Kenny Vaccaro. The big question on the Saints was, one of their major plus points last year was Ingram and Kamara. Does the Ingram suspension affect the first 4 weeks of the Saints' schedule to a dramatic effect? They play the Bucs at home, the Browns at home, the Falcons on the road, and the Giants on the road.
I don't think it means. I don't think it matters for the opening of the season because they I think Alvin Kamara can take a substantial increase to his workload, considering he was sort of stepping ahead of Mark Ingram at the back end of last season anyway. The problem for New Orleans is, if you look at their end of season schedule, they can afford no slip-ups for the first half of their season because they literally finish, we'll go from week 17 backwards, versus Carolina, versus Pittsburgh, at Carolina, at Tampa, at Dallas, versus Atlanta, versus Philadelphia. There's not many gimmies there, and they're having to play the Panthers twice in 3 weeks at the end. The Panthers may, probably be out of it, as I seem to think, but this division plays itself very close. They need to start hot and stay hot, and it's just a question of if they are going to force feed Alvin Kamara, can he still be he's not going to be as efficient as he was last year, but can he still be efficient? Or do they then have to go back to what held them back for so many years and basically put it all on the arm of Drew Brees?
It's one of them things, isn't it? The first 4 weeks, they're going to have to utilise Alvin Kamara, but they don't want to utilise him too much because they're going to need him at the end of the year. Okay, can they then rely on Ingram towards the end of the year? Well, maybe, but will he be undercooked because he hasn't played the first 4 weeks? It's a tough one. They have got Drew Brees. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's one of the best quarterbacks ever. But as you said, they're always better when they don't have to rely on him as much. The same with most quarterbacks, right? They've got that him to Michael Thomas thing, which is probably one of the most underrated 1-2s in the whole of the NFL. Michael Thomas, criminally undervalued in every fantasy draft since he's been in the league. I'm sure it will happen again in most leagues, not ours.
Hashtag not my league.
Hashtag spoiler alert, yeah. Hashtag not my league. It's tough. I think they're talented. Let's be honest, they would have flew play away from playing the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. I don't mean fluke play, just a badly played defensive play from playing the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. And I have a feeling they wouldn't have bottled it as much as Minnesota would have. But we don't know. So they are a talented team. They were better on defense last year, much better, drafted really well last year. They hope to get something out of Marcus Davenport. Not really a renowned person in the draft, but someone they wanted to take, so we'll see how that goes. I just hope that for their sake that the Ingram suspension doesn't derail them towards, as you said quite rightly, towards the end of the season. When you look at it, they're playing the Bucs with no Jameis Winston. They're playing the Browns week 2. At the Falcons is tough, regardless of Ingram's there or not. And at the Giants, who we've decided are garbage. So they should be 3-1. If they're 3-1, then it's probably fine.
But if they're 2-2 or somehow 1-3, and don't forget, as good as they were last season, they've been bog average for the last 5 years. Last year, at the moment, could be the blip.
Absolutely. Who's the fancy breakout star, Neil?
Fancy breakout is an acquisition they made this off-season. It's Cameron Meredith. Now, obviously, as we said, they have Michael Thomas, who is going to see a majority of the targets. But if there's one thing that we have seen Drew Brees likes to do, it's throw to his running backs, throw to his tight ends, and throw to his slot receivers. Just look at the relationship he had with Marcus Colston during Colston's time with the Saints. Meredith is going to play in the slot. If we assume they're not going to be as run-heavy this season as they were last year, I think last year they had as many rushing touchdowns as they had passing touchdowns. That's probably going to change. Without Ingram and Kamara, they may have to pass the ball a bit more, so there might be a bit more added volume. They don't really have a tight end of consequence. Ben Watson, bless him, is 300 years old. Spoiler alert, Ben Watson is 1 day older than me. But anyway, that doesn't fit the narrative. So I think Meredith, the Bears bloomed by not tendering him at the second round level. He's gone here to, an offense, a chance to play with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He is going at wide receiver 50 in drafts. And as I say, you've got him playing with Drew Brees in a position that Brees has historically targeted. I'd rather have him than Ridley and Moore 5 or 6 picks earlier.
Who's fancy rogue, Neil?
Mark Ingram. The Saints have gone out of their way over the last few years to try not to play Mark Ingram. And then this year, he went out of his way to make the decision easy for them by popping PEDs. And the good thing, of course, is, if you're going to get a PED suspension, make sure you didn't turn up for OTAs as well. To piss and moan about your contract. That's a really good idea. I say it's a 4-game suspension. Mark Ingram is currently being taken running back 23. You're taking a running back, someone who, on that value, you expect him to be one of the top 24 players. So a RB2, he's going to miss a quarter of the season, and you're spending that higher pick on him. Personally, I don't like drafting players who are injured, and I don't like drafting players who are coming off PED suspensions, as bad things happen. So Ingram has to drop an awful lot further in leagues for me to take him, because, as I say, he's going to be sitting there on your bench for the first 4 weeks, at least.
Yeah, it's one of them things, isn't it? It becomes a game of chicken at that point if you're going to draft him. You obviously don't want to draft him early because he can't play. So he's not going to play till week 5. So the question then becomes, when do you gamble on taking him? And is he going to, as you said, no OTAs and out the first 4? Will he be fully in the doghouse when he comes back as well? I think it depends on how they do in those first 4 games.
Exactly.
Win total for the Saints is the same as the Falcons. It's 9.5. They have home games against the Browns, Washington, the Rams, the Eagles, and the Steelers. Let's all sit back and think that we have in New Orleans Saints v Rams, Saints v Eagles, Saints v Steelers. When we get to those games and we look at our daily fantasy teams of the week, there's a high possibility the players from those teams will be involved. They have road games against the Giants, the Ravens, and then the Vikings. That's back to back. The Bengals and the Cowboys. Win total is 9.5. Neil, champs or chumps?
I'm going to go chumps. I just think that end of season run-in could do them in. I think they'll put up a lot more points. I think they'll be, they were efficient on offense last year. They were 3rd in yards per drive, 2nd in points per drive. So obviously they were effective. But I don't think they can. I don't think they can catch lightning in the bottle twice. And I as good as they are, it's, as I say, they've got a much tougher schedule this time round. And I just think I think the Falcons are the class of the division, and I think everyone else is playing catch up. And I think the Saints, as I say, have had one good year out of 5. Now they've got a really good schedule ahead of them. I think they could suffer. They'll still be good at home, they always are. But winning, can I see them winning 10, 11 games? No.
It's tough because there's shootouts in this team's future, as there always is. If they win them, because they are better on defense. That was proven last year. If they can make a couple of stops, not many teams is going to be able to stop them.
No,
they've never been able to. So if the defense can keep on making plays and stops, then this could be 12-4. However, it could also be 7-9, and that's what they've been like. Apart from last year, the 4 years previous, right?
Yeah.
We look, they're going to play Carolina. That's always a shootout at home. They're going to play Atlanta at home. They got Washington, who will move up and down the field. We do not know whether they will score points or not. The Rams will score points. The Eagles will score points. The Steelers will score points. They're going to play the Vikings in Minnesota. That will have points involved. Do you know what I mean? There's games where you're like, ooh, if the defense does what it needs to do and makes 3 to 4 plays a game, it's a 12-4 team. If they don't, it's a 7-9 team.
Yeah.
So I'm, as you can tell, I'm absolutely sitting on the fence here. But I'm actually going to go champs. I actually think the Saints are going to win this division, not the Falcons. Last and it is least is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ins Vinny Curry and Vita Vea, who's a defensive tackle from Washington, not Maryland, Landover, but Seattle. Out, Chris Baker, Doug Martin, finally, J.R. Sweezy, probably the best name in the NFL, and obviously Jameis Winston for 4 games. 3, sorry. Big question, before Winston is back, they play at the Saints versus the Eagles versus the Steelers. What do they need to do in those 3 games to still be in the hunt when Jameis comes back?
Win all 3. It's the only thing they can do. But they won't. They'll go on 3, and then they've got Then they've got Thursday night game against Chicago for Jameis' first game back. That's 0-4 right away. And in this division, as we've seen, 0-4, that's you're done.
You look at it and you're like, at the Saints, although Harvard's own in a shootout, loves a shootout, but probably loves a costly interception, and or 4. And then they play the Eagles and the Steelers, and it doesn't matter if they had Jameis Winston or not, they're not as talented as those 2 teams, so you expect them to lose, regardless of where it is. If they want to stay in the hunt, they need to win at least one of those games, preferably the Saints, because then you into division you want to know. But I don't know. As we joke every year, Dutton, usually one of us is high on this team. I think I went on TalkSport 2 last year and said this team was going to win the division, and you'd be shocked to hear I've never been invited back. Yeah, I'm not in on them, and I know you're not, so this is a first for us.
Sorry, Daggers.
Well, it's probably good for Daggers, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, I know, I think that's a good thing. I just don't see it. The talent on the defensive line, yeah, but I'm not sure on the offense. Yeah, I'm not. I'm behind it as well. I'm not sure.
I mean, one of the big problems they've had the last 3 years, they've become more and more pass heavy. They've run the ball less and less. I mean, last year they passed on 62.4% of their plays. That's the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. They were trailing 66.4% of the plays. That was the 3rd most in the NFL. The defense was crap. They couldn't rush the passer. They had the lowest forced sack rate. And say they couldn't run the ball. Didn't even try to run the ball. They couldn't stop anyone running on them, and they couldn't stop the pass. So yeah, they've got a few nice pieces. They've got Vinny Curry in, they've got Vita Vea, they've got Bo Allen. But the secondary's trash, and unfortunately, you're going to play 6 games a season against Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, and Cam Newton, and you can't stop them. So unless let's say unless your pass rush can get there like that, which would be the first time it has done since 2006 for the Bucs, they're going to get torn to pieces in the back end. And plus, I just don't think Dirk Cotter is a very good head coach. And I think when they're going to start 0-4, which they could do depending on how well you think Chicago are, and then they've got Atlanta after their bye in week 5, so it's an early bye which probably won't help them. You could be looking at 0-5 after 6 weeks of the season.
Mm.
Well, what's one thing we know about Tampa Bay when things start going south for the coach? They go south quickly.
Absolutely. I just look and think you hit the nail on the head on the secondary's not very good, and I always think that it's a copycat league, but it also your job is to try and match up and beat your division. So you should, if your division's got Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, and Drew Brees, you should have a good secondary. Like we've said, when we did the NFC East thing, those teams like Washington and Philadelphia, and to some extent Dallas, have tried to sort out both lines because they know get to the quarterback and be able to run the ball, and you're in with a chance of winning that division. And if you win that division, we'll see what happens. And I just look at Tampa Bay and I'm like, you haven't really done that. You haven't addressed what all the other teams do. Saints addressed their secondary last year and it worked. Atlanta have a good secondary. Carolina renowned for having a good secondary. It wasn't as great last year, but this is what got them to the Super Bowl. So it's interesting. I don't know. I don't see a lot of time. I don't see this team being any good.
And it's bizarre personnel decisions. Like I say, we saw last year that the Saints improved their secondary and also made a huge commitment to running the ball. So they didn't improve the secondary, the Bucs, but drafted Ronald Jones when other better options, more multi-dimensional options were available in the draft. Darius Geis, for example, say what you want. Obviously, he got injured, but that was a freak injury. It's not as if he's injury prone. I would have taken Geis ahead of Ronald Jones, but they took Ronald Jones because they heard he's like Jamal Charles, except without the receiving ability. So nothing like Jamal Charles then.
That doesn't make sense, does it? Doesn't make sense, Neil. Let's go fancy breakout on the Tampa Bay Bucs.
Fancy breakout, in my opinion, if he can crack the starting lineup. Now, earlier this off-season, their OC, Todd Monken, said Chris Godwin has earned the right to be a starter, but then qualified it by saying he wasn't. Then a few weeks ago, they said, yeah, Chris Godwin is probably going to be the starter on the outside. They're kicking Deshaun Jackson into the slot a bit more. That's great. Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston were not on the same page at all last year. We know Mike Evans is going to be a target monster because that's why they're paying him. But Chris Godwin led the Bucs last year in yards per route run. He had like two yards per route run. That's pretty good, considering how many number of routes they run. And he entered the season well, and he got 7 for 111 and a touchdown against the Saints in Week 17. And believe me, the Saints were still trying. He's big. He's put this way, if you want to know if someone is a good wide receiving prospect, if you have the words a Matt Harmon favourite, I think that carries a lot more weight than anything I'm going to say.
I think it does, Neil. I think it does.
So if Godwin can get in, and as we expect, the Bucs are not able to run the ball, and they have to play the passing game an awful lot more. If Godwin can crack the start lineup, considering, as I say, at the moment he is going wide receiver 64. Potentially he could have wide receiver 3 weeks if he gets the volume and he gets the playing time.
Who's fantasy broke, Neil?
Ronald Jones, running back 27 for a running back who can't pass block, can't catch when you're going to be behind an awful lot. So he's going to have to learn to pass block and catch. And plus the fact the Bucs have already come out and said, yeah, Peyton Barber's our starter. Jesus, I quite like Peyton Barber, but they had him last season and knew what he was. And then they drafted Ronald Jones, and after one preseason game, they can't say, yeah, Peyton Barber. Too rich for my blood. Don't like his ADP. Don't like his prospects. Don't like this team. Think they suck. They're going to have to blow it up this the next off-season, and it'll start with a decision as to whether Jameis Winston is the man moving forward.
It does start with the quarterback, Neil. Win total is 6.5. They got home games against the Eagles and the Steelers, as we said, back-to-back pre-Winston return. They also play the Browns, Washington, and the 49ers at home. They have road games against the Bears, which, as Neil said, is James' first game back. Thursday night. They also play the Bengals, the Giants, the Cowboys. 6.5, Neil. Champs or chumps?
Chumps, top 4 pick next season.
Yeah, it's 5-11, right? 5-11, 4-12. I don't see it. The issue here is for Tampa Bay is are the Glazers willing to pay two head coaches in two different sports to leave their sporting franchises alone? We will see, but I do believe more likely on the Tampa Bay than the Manchester United one. But we do think that if this doesn't work this year, it is a blow-up situation, and as you quite rightly pointed out, that it then becomes a massive decision on the quarterback.
As good as Jameis Winston has been in spells, does he strike you as a leader of men in the NFL in the long term?
I don't know. It's a weird one, though, because my understanding is he is a leader of men, and people do like him. My issue is that I want my leaders to make better decisions. And he's been a winner in both the NFL and college, but has also made some really, really bad decisions. And it's one of them situations we talk about all the time that, talent gets you out of a load of issues. But I wonder, are you going to commit a lot of money to him when you're concerned by the decisions he makes in certain times? And like, if it was 3 games this time. If something happens again, it won't be 3 games. It'll be 12, or it'll be a season, and you may have just paid him $100 million. That's a major concern if you're the Glazers and the Tampa Bay Bucs.
The concern would be, of course, to say when they have to blow it up, it'll be Jason Light will go because they've not drafted well. Dirk Kotter will go. So then it's a question of, are you able to attract a head coach and sell him that? What can you do with Jameis Winston? Or are you bringing in a GM and a coach saying, don't worry about him, we'll get him rid?
Well, I mean, to be honest, that'll be the interview, won't it? What are you going to do with Jameis Winston? For the GM and the head coach, I guess. So, to be seen. We look at the division. Neil thinks Atlanta win. I think the Saints. We then think that swap round for the second place. Carolina third, and Tampa Bay a distant fourth.
They're only finishing fourth because there aren't 5 teams in this division.
Correct. Neil, that's it. NFC South in the books. Two divisions left. Next week, get to focus on John Gruden. Can't wait.
Joy.
Anything to plug before we go, even though you only plugged stuff about 48 hours ago?
The stuff I plugged 48 hours ago has now been published, so I can press that on again. I had to write 4 players with rising ADPs in best ball leagues as we approach. Excuse me, I will have a piece coming out early next week. It's a compilation piece for Number Fire, where I identified my favourite sleeper tight end this year. I'll give you a hint. We haven't talked about him or his team or division yet. Little tease there for everyone. And at the moment, just that's it. So I'm pretty tired from the last stuff I did. So
excellent, Neil. Excellent. Well, we'll be back next week talking AFC West. Elway, Gruden, Big Red, and the Chargers. It's like going back to 2000 here. And on that note and on that tease, these top guys are out.